to another Greenville County Library System virtual event. This time we're talking soil health. Tonight we're going to see the results from part 1 of the soil health exploration series. So we are of course joined again with Greenville County Soil and Water Conservation District. We have our wonderful presenters this evening, Shanine and Kirsten. They're going to tell us all about those results and let us know how healthy our soil is based on our products. So we're so glad you could join us. Just a few other little notes before we get going into that. If you're interested in more virtual events like this one, be sure to check out our calendar of live events at greenvillelibrary.org/events. You can always register for those events in advance or pop those onto your own calendar so you don't miss anything like this one. And if you want to learn more about gardening and sustainability, you're going to want to check out our seed library that is always at the Berea branch. So it's open every time the library is open, and you can visit them every day. You can get up to 10 packets of seeds per family. And again, you can do that every day if you wanted to. So check out all the information there at greenvillelibrary.org/seed library. Now, to get to the actual meeting that we're all here, I'd like to introduce you to Shanine and Kirsten. Thank you so much.
Welcome to Soil Health Exploration, the result. So we have soiled our undies, and today we're going to show our undies to go ahead and look at how healthy are our soils. So let's get started. As Rachel mentioned, I am here with Kirsten Robertson. Kirsten, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kirsten Robertson, and I'm the manager of the Greenville County Soil and Water Conservation District, and I am nutso about soils, and I'm excited to be here.
Yes. And I am Shanine Haler. I am the Stormwater Programs Coordinator, not manager, at Greenville County Soil and Water Conservation District. I too really enjoy soils and learning about them, so I'm glad that we are all here tonight. And then we of course have the amazing Rachel, who spoke with us just a moment ago. If you have questions throughout this, since we're such a small group, leave your video on, leave yourself unmuted as long as there aren't like dogs barking in the background. And let's just have an open kind of discussion of what we found through our experiments tonight. So I'm assuming we all have our materials. We are going to give you some time to go ahead and go uncover your undies during this hour. So if you have a shovel or a trowel handy, that would be a good thing to find now. Also, so ensure you're muted, ignore that. And I think the rest of it is all pretty self-explanatory. Any questions before we get started here? So first and foremost, we're just going to do a quick overview of the agenda. Tonight, we're going to review the soil health principles that we talked about 2 months ago already. We're going to go ahead and give you some time to uncover your undies and then show us your undies. That's the part that I'm most excited about for tonight. And then we're going to do a results review of each experiment that we've sent to you over the past 2 months. So that would be the critter critique, the soil stability test, and the find your hard pan experiment. And finally, we'll close tonight with ways and ideas on how y'all can promote soil health in your backyards. And we have a couple questions for you. Since this is our first time giving a presentation like this, we'd love to hear what your favorite parts were, or maybe what we could do better. So without further ado, let's get started. Kirsten, I'll hand it over.
All right, so we're going to give just a real quick recap about soil health, and then we're going to get on to the experiments. But I wanted to remind you about why those microbes that we wanted to eat our underwear are important and what that means to the soil. Okay, so plants make sugar out of sunlight, which seems like a pretty good deal. And they use those sugars to grow, and they use them as nectar. Like that's where the sugars that the bees and the butterflies, where they get that. But plants also, they exude or drip out sugars from their roots. And that can be 40 to 80% of the sugars that they make, they put out through their roots. And that is so that those microbes, the microscopic animals and bacteria and fungi, that they will get those carbohydrates and they in turn do things for the plants, so that there's this little ecosystem that you never even knew was there, and it's very busy all the time. And what that does is it powers this whole underground ecosystem, because the nematodes and the protozoa come and they eat the bacteria, and then they die or poop, and that makes more nitrogen for the plant. And then there are other things in the soil that eat the nematodes and the protozoa, and it moves up the food chain, just like you see on your screen. Then you end up with beetles and earthworms, and they're digging tunnels, which make an easy way for for water to get into your soil. And then you get moles, not voles. We don't want voles because voles eat roots, but moles just tunnel through, and that makes great tunnels for your water to get down into your soil. So the whole start of this is the microbes and the soil, or the sugars that the plants are giving out. Okay, next. So the way that you encourage these microbes are through the soil health principles. And these were formulated based on watching natural ecosystems, because natural ecosystems, they don't require any fertilizer or pesticides or irrigation. They just work. So there are 5 soil health principles. The first one, and think about these as you're thinking about a forest. The first one is keep it covered. Second one is to limit disturbance. Third one is to keep a living root. Fourth one is to maximize plant diversity. And there's my thumb and my pinky. It's not very diverse. And then the 5th one is to integrate animals. Okay, next, Shanine.
Yep.
Okay, the first one is to keep it covered, and you want to do that so that the soil will be cooler, because those microbes can't live in really hot soil. You'll have less erosion, less weeding, and that's mimicking a forest floor. Think about all the duff and organic matter that's just laying on top of a forest floor. Okay. The next one is to do not disturb. And here we've got, you want to try to till as little as possible. So you can pretend that you are a fungi, or actually even an earthworm. And here are these big, huge tines from a rototiller or blades from a plow coming through, and they're going to slice me right in half and either kill me or make me much less effective. And it really disturbs churning. It really disturbs the ecosystem. So you want to try to disturb the soil as little as possible. And you can research no-till gardening or no-dig gardening on the internet and get ideas for how to do that. Okay. The next one is to keep a living root, because that is the engine that runs this whole thing. Like I said, that living root, it doesn't matter what kind of plant it is. If you don't have a plant there, then Mother Nature's going to put a plant there, and it's probably going to be a weed. But the main thing that this ends up affecting farmers and gardeners is to try to use cover crops, because that is a new root in the ground, and it's a root in the ground over the winter when you might not have anything in your ground in your garden. So we're encouraging cover crops, just like a natural forest always has a living root. Okay. And then maximizing plant diversity. This is making sure that you have lots of different kinds of plants, because every single plant has a different role to play in the ecosystem. Their root systems might be deeper or thicker. They each have their own role to play. So we recommend having as many different types of plants, and if you're adding compost, use different kinds of compost, just as much diversity as you can. The last one is to integrate animals. I have a farm with chickens and sheep, and I can integrate those animals into my garden, but it's a little harder for people that don't have those. So the way you can do that is you can buy amendments like compost and manures, bone meal, blood meal, fish emulsion. Those are all animal products that will actually help your garden and add to the diversity. And it is the way that nature works, because there is no ecosystem on Earth that doesn't have some sort of animal in it. Nature requires animals to work.
So any questions about the soil health principles before we go on?
No, everything makes sense. It really does. Just take care of your soil. Like I say, if it's bare, it'll be hotter. Organisms won't grow as much in that, hot environment. It's going to dry out quicker. I know when I was mapping soils, it was a big difference. If you're out in the pasture, just with grass on there, and you would bore a hole to look at the soil, it'd be it would be fairly moist. If you go right across into the woods line, the same soil, maybe 50, 100 feet in, it'd be way drier because the trees were drawing out all that moisture. So, but the forest soils were healthier. They had a much thicker surface horizon. That A horizon was much thicker and darker too. So, and just a comment for me about how cover can influence soils a lot.
I love hearing your stories, Dennis. That's great.
I also like the point you make that like maybe soil is moist, but it doesn't necessarily equal health. I think that's an important point. There are many indicators that can signal health, just like in a human. Soils have many indicators of health too. So just because it has one thing really great doesn't necessarily mean it's balanced or holistically healthy. So that's awesome.
One more story, if I could. I mean, I hate to ramble on here, but when I worked in North Dakota for a little while, and when I first went there, around here, dark soils, thick black soils are normally wet because we have a high year-round temperature here that the organic matter can oxidize almost year-round. It'll burn up. And our trees in the southeast US really don't put out that much organic matter compared to the prairie grasses in the Midwest. So over thousands of years, those grass roots are in the soil down to 10 feet deep. And grass puts out way more organic matter than a tree does. So my point of the story is that when I was out there mapping, on well-drained soils, we'd have a 2-foot thick A horizon, just black, pretty as you want to see. I mean, I could not believe that something well-drained could have that much of a thick and black surface. So that's our nation's breadbasket. And I can see why, because those soils are so fertile over thousands of years growing under grass. And around here, if we get like a 6-inch A horizon, that's a lot. That's thick for here, for us anyway. Also out there, the soil's frozen half the year. So the organic does not break down when it's inert. It's just kind of like a suspended animation. So I better quit rambling. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's all.
What were
Well,
you gonna say, Kirsten?
That was our intention, Dennis, is to have everybody talk on this. So
good.
I'm really
Okay.
grateful that for your input, and that's really interesting stuff.
Good, good.
Thank you. All right. Well, without further ado, let's go ahead. We're going to take like 10, 15 minutes right now and go unearth your undies. If you would like to bring your device along with you and show us the process, awesome. If that doesn't work for you, we will reconvene once everyone's back.
I have done this experiment before, and when I took the underwear out, it was barely even dirty. Like the microbes hadn't even touched it. So that you can get some vastly different results here, and it's really interesting experiment.
So we saw Dennis's results, and these, yes, thank you. Dennis.
That's great.
That's amazing. I love it.
And now mine got a lot of water because they're right next to my tomato plant. So I may be cheating in that respect. I didn't put fertilizer on here like I did my plants, but you know, the plants were about maybe a foot and a half away from where these were buried. But they would get water from the tomatoes when I would just put water on there every day. And that area has been heavily mulched for a lot of years too.
Yes, these are all great notes to keep in mind when we start talking about the holistic health of our soils. Yes, so that's
Basically, our set of underwear was just pretty much intact. So
pretty much intact. Okay. That is interesting. That's very different than what we're seeing from Dennis. Okay. And where did you have yours buried?
we had them in our front yard.
Okay.
I love that you buried underwear in your front yard. That makes my heart so happy. I'm sure your neighbors enjoyed that.
All right, so I want to show you my results and some results from Oregon. So as we mentioned at the very first meeting, this is a nationwide, or this is a national campaign to kind of focus on soil health. So these are two farmers in Oregon that did the same experiment that y'all just did, and these were their results. I personally love the picture with the dogs because you can see how much older the dogs are and how great her soil is. Looks like she has a vineyard behind her as well. And then these were my results. I had my undies planted next to my butter peas this year. And I was lazy about weeding around them. So all of the grass kind of underneath me was on top of where I had planted them as well. I'm pretty happy with that result. I will say that.
Yeah.
Okay. So keep that in mind, kind of remember your results from this, and then we're going to talk about the 3 other experiments as well right now. And again, this is a discussion. Oh, shoot, I forgot about this slide. So results description. So as we kind of mentioned in the very beginning, the more decomposed, decomposition that you see in your undies, or the more that the microbes have eaten of that cotton, indicates more soil life activity in your soil or where you planted your undies. So the less of those undies you have left, or the more degraded your undies are, the more active your soil microbes were over the last 2 months. And more active microbes, as we mentioned in that whole soil life circle, means healthier soil, because they're kind of like the base form of life after plants and plant roots that really start that cycle moving forward. Okay. So speaking of soil life, let's talk about our critter critiques. That one was really cool for us. So as Kirsten mentioned, critters are crucial to soil health. Earthworms, the reason that we picked out earthworms, beetles, and grubs for that experiment is because they're the easiest to see, but really you missed millions of soil life forms when we did those experiments. So if y'all participated, I'd love to hear kind of what you found the most of, what, if anything, surprised you in your critter critique.
I'll go first if you want.
Yeah, it looks like Sandy's having some connection trouble, so we'll start with you.
Oh, okay. I found 5 or 6 earthworms, and some were in pieces from the shovels. I can't tell if it was 4 or 7 or whatever, but there were several earthworms when I dug up that like 1 foot square area. Well, actually, no, we did this next to this to the underwear, didn't we? Yeah.
Yep.
I didn't find any ants, 0 ants in the area. And I found, as far as the beetles goes, I found 3 or 4 black, and I called them earwigs. They're like beetles with the pincher on their back end, the way it looks. Are those earwigs?
Kirsten, do you know?
I don't know. That's what I
think
called
so.
them.
Yeah, I think they are.
Yeah, but I found 3. They're shiny, maybe about a 1/4 inch or maybe a little bit larger. You know, found some of those. But I found a lot of little tiny white little mites with feathery feet or something, legs that were kind of scurrying around, but they were in the soil. They were pure snow white. I don't know what they were, but a bunch of those. But I'm happy they were there. They weren't, they were a positive influence on there. They weren't really grubs. I know you have grubs on the on your list here, but I didn't see any grubs.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did they crawl quickly? Were they easy to identify? What shape were they?
Yeah, I wish I'd taken a picture.
Me
In fact,
too.
I should have looked tonight out there for them. They were really like a pinhead at the largest.
Okay.
You can picture a pinhead. That would be a big one. They're maybe half as big as a pinhead. You had to look close even to see them. And at first I thought they were just like white specks in the soil. Then they were starting to move. There wasn't, like I said, I found I have in my notes about 5, but there's probably, more than that were there, but
Those were
they
the
would
ones you
move.
could see. Did they look
Yeah.
something like this?
Kind of like that, yeah, but
These
not
are
as,
not in the soil though, so I'm
no,
not
but
sure.
not as plump.
Not as plump. Okay.
No, ma'am. And
Now
and,
I'm curious too. And since we have
Yeah.
a minute, I figured I'd do a quick little search.
yeah, thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
See,
My question
it
is,
might
are-
be a springtail mealybug or soil mite infestation. They live off your plant and the debris in the soil. And that's what they thought it was. And those
Okay.
were earwigs. So you were right, Dennis.
Okay,
Hmm,
The other ones that you were talking about.
yeah,
this is what Google says soil mites look like. These little guys here.
that could be it, Shanine.
Those look pretty small.
They look pretty small.
Mhm.
Yep.
Interesting.
Now, Kirsten, does that mean they're a bad thing? The soil mites are not a positive thing, do you think?
Well, it called it a pest. I haven't run across soil mites, so I don't know. But the Google knows.
Yeah, yeah,
And I can get back with you on it if you want to.
sure.
Look
I'll
at
look
more
there
into-
again after we hang up here and I'll go through it. Maybe I'll take a picture if I can,
Okay.
That'd be cool.
if they're
Great.
out there. Mhm.
Okay, well, since we don't have Sandy yet, that's really interesting. I love that we are finding new things too that we can kind of discuss and talk about. I'm going to go ahead and let's continue on to our next experiment. So it sounds like you had a decent amount of life in 1 or 2 shovelfuls of soil. That's great.
Yeah, I think there was, but again, it's kind of in the shade, gets a lot of water all the time.
Mhm. Mhm.
There's mulch on there for many years. Really, I plant my tomatoes in my landscaping beds. I don't have a garden per se. I raise tomatoes and basil. That's it, for table use. And to give away, because 3 basil plants can feed half a neighborhood, really.
So true.
So,
Awesome. Thank you, Dennis.
yep.
All right, so next up, we'll talk the soil stability test. So Kirsten and I really love this because it's so visual, especially when you have 2 samples next to each other, like you can see in this screenshot I have from a Ray Archuleta video on YouTube. Essentially, the faster your soil clod breaks apart in water, the less stable your soil is. Stable soils tend to have balanced components. So they're going to function better as a growing medium and a habitat. Essentially, like if my house collapsed every time it rained really hard, I wouldn't want to live there. Soil life is the same way. And your plant's roots are going to grapple to maintain their hold wherever they are. That's why you see, like when you see extreme erosion on stream banks or things like that, you're also seeing trees tumble and things of that nature. So it all kind of works together. I know we had y'all do, what was it, Kirsten? 30 minutes, 3 hours, and 24 hours? I know we did a couple different times. 24 hours may have been too long. But definitely, Dennis, kind of what did you find with this experiment? How did your soil hold up?
Well, I got lucky. I took a PED, which is a unit of soil out there, and it was really full of organic matter. And by the way, YouTube videos were great that were on there. That really was helpful to see how to do this, and very descriptive too, really helped. Mine held up even overnight. I took some pictures. I sent it to Kirsten. I think you too, Shanine.
I think I have those, yes.
Yeah. So mine held up quite well, but again, I was looking for a good soil bed too. I kind of know what to look for. So again, kind of not really cheating, but I've been, I was looking
Discerning.
But yeah,
You were discerning.
that's right. Discerning. Yes. So, and I let mine overnight on the porch outside. After a couple hours, I noticed that the burlap was wicking the water out of the jar it was in. So I had to put it in a plastic bowl and fill the bowl up to the edge of the jar and weight it down so it wouldn't tip over. So, and it worked. Over 24 hours later, it was still holding together.
Dennis, do you mind if I share your photos?
Oh, sure.
Okay, great.
Of course,
I have
yeah,
them pulled up here.
Sure. Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that on the left, that PED before immersion.
Mhm.
And then right away after immersion, like that was one of your requests to do it right after.
Mhm.
And that was 3 hours. Just a little bit of debris fell down after 3 hours.
This looks awesome.
And then 24 hours, not much difference really. And you can see all the water on the tabletop there outside on the glass tabletop that it came out.
That
And that
was
was my
the,
setup. That's how I had to do it after the
yes,
3 hour setup. I knew I could figure something out. So
that was
Thank
super
you.
creative.
Yeah.
Thank
no
you.
kidding.
And that's great feedback too. We hadn't tested it for 24 hours before we sent it to y'all with the burlap as the wire, kind of the holder of that
Yeah.
soil. We use metal when we're doing it on our own or here as presentations or demonstrations.
yeah, the wire would be okay, but the burlap may wick a lot of the water out
Mhm.
overnight.
Yes, that is a really good point. So this is what we would call a very stable soil. Yes, this looks fantastic. To not lose that PED or that clod over the course of 24 hours means that something could still be living in there, like the aggregates are holding together well.
Mhm.
Which is another really great sign of soil health, because soil life is what really promotes soil stability. Okay. The next experiment. Kirsten, anything to add on this one?
No, I'm just, thank you for going to all that extra effort to try to make sure that you could keep it going for 24 hours. Our apologies for not
Oh,
making it
no,
seamless, but that's great feedback for us for
Good.
the next time we do this, for sure.
Sure.
All right. And then our final additional experiment was find your hard pan. And this one was fun for us because it was a new thing for Kirsten and I to figure out, but it's also something that's super important for plant growth and root penetration is what we say. So the deeper your roots can go into your soil, the more nutrients they can pull from different levels of your soil too, for lack of a better way to say it. Horizons is the technical term, but levels works as well. So the deeper you go, the different composition soil has and the different nutrients and minerals and different things it will hold. But if your hard pan, wherever your hard pan is, that is as deep as your roots can grow. They will stop. So like we have in this illustration here, the hard pan is this kind of light brown line and the roots stop and they'll go horizontal. So if your hard pan is only, I don't know, 10, 12 inches down, that's all the deeper your roots can grow. So ideally we want to deepen that hard pan as far down as we can possibly go. So Kirsten, do you remember how deep was the hard pan you had found?
Ours was about 6 inches.
6 inches. Yes. Dennis, how deep was yours?
About 4 inches on my end.
About 4 inches.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I did not do this one, so I don't know how deep mine was, but I would imagine it's somewhere around that 4-inch mark as well. So as we saw in Kirsten's YouTube videos, which I thought were really helpful to kind of explain what hard pan is and how it's created, the more tilling, this is where the no-till gardening really can help. The more tilling we do, the more prevalent our hard pan is going to be. So as deep as you till is where that hard pan is going to start. And really, we're not tilling that deep if you think about a rototiller, or if you think about your hoe, or if you think about larger machinery and bigger operations. As deep as those times go is as deep as your hard pan is, and that's as deep as your roots can grow. So just something to keep in mind. And we're going to talk about ways to kind of promote soil health, and all of these ways that promote soil health will also help deepen your hard pan or break up your hard pan so that roots can grow deeper as well. Because I learned this through this process, earthworms are the #1 hard pan buster. They are the ones that can dig through that really tough soil layer. So the more earthworms, the more, or the less likely you are to have a hard pan that is really high. Did I explain that okay, Kirsten?
Yeah, you did great.
Okay, great. I think this is fascinating. Earthworms, who knew, right? Amazing little guys. Okay, so that one was pretty quick. We're going to go ahead and we're going to talk a little bit now about, what do I have next? Promoting soil health in your garden. So Dennis, I think what I'm hearing from your experiment results is that you have some pretty healthy soil, honestly. Perhaps we can work on that hard pan situation a little bit, but
Okay.
the rest of it sounds like you are on the right path. And I think that's because we are seeing a lot of these soil health practices in how you manage your garden space. And I'm gonna let Kirsten take over from here.
Okay.
Okay, so we generated, excuse me, we've generated this new, it's a brand new graphic that kind of shows what you can do in your garden or yard that will address each of the different soil principles. So you can see which one's going to give you the most bang for your buck. You can see if you know that your ground needs to be covered, if it's out there bare and you're looking at it and you're like, well, what do I do? Well, just look down that column and you can see under keep it covered, there are several different possibilities for things that you can do to keep your soil covered. So I think what I'd like to do is just kind of work through these down the left side, the practices, and then we can talk about which of the 5 soil principles that they cover and why. So the first one is to mulch around your plants. And this just has so many positive effects. So mulching, obviously, you're gonna, that keeps it covered, and you can mulch with straw or with pine straw. Those are probably 2 of the best because those are going to break down into your soil. If you mulch with hay, which is different, if you mulch with hay, hay tends to have some seeds in it, and it's more likely to put grass seeds into your garden, and that ends up being a mess later on. So we do recommend straw or pine straw if you're going to mulch. If you're mulching, then you're probably not disturbing your plants a lot, and it does keep from having weeds come up. So you're not having to disturb and cultivate, because that mulch is keeping those weeds from getting to the sunlight and being able to germinate. Mulching, depending on what kind of mulch you have, it adds diversity to your garden. You're adding different nutrients from different places. The pine straw is not where your garden is. So if you're bringing it in from outside, then it's actually adding to the nutrients and the biodiversity in your garden. Planting cover crops. Cover crops are plants that are not your main plants. Like if you're planting tomatoes, a cover crop might be a plant that you would plant in the winter, so that your soil would have a plant during the winter. Or if you section up your garden and plant tomatoes here one year, the next year you may just plant a cover crop of, and there's all kinds of different cover crops. You can plant buckwheat, which is great for pollinators during the summer, or you can plant rye during the winter, which will, it has very thin fibrous roots, and it's very good for going down and trying to help break up that hard pan, because you would want a fine little root. But cover crops work to keep your soil covered. You can cover your soil with mulch or a cover crop. Both of those count as keeping it covered. It's keeping a living root, it's adding diversity. And the cover crops, you're bringing in different pollinators. And so that's actually incorporating animals. You're not doing it, but you're bringing the thing in that would bring the animals into your system. Avoid stepping on your garden as much as possible. And that's do not disturb, because compaction counts as disturbing. And let's see, tilling less, obviously that's a do not disturb. And the way that you can do this is, you'll see this in the no-till or no-dig gardenings. You can put out a mulch and then just dig just enough space to put your seed or your small transplant in, and then keep it mulched around it. And that's one way. I know that's very intensive, but there are other ways once you start scaling up. But if you're doing a small garden, that's a way to do that. Plant native wildflowers near or with other plants. Again, that's keeping a living root, that's adding diversity, and you're bringing in your pollinators. Adding compost adds diversity, and again, it incorporates animals depending on what type of compost that you bring in. A good compost, there are bad composts, believe it or not, and a good compost has the right mix of microbes. The bacteria to fungi ratio can change in different composts, and you can have the wrong kind of bacteria. Anaerobic bacteria is terrible for your soil. So it's really important to have the right kind of compost. And that's the microscopic animals count too. So that's incorporating your animals. Implement intercropping, and it's kind of what Dennis had going on with, he had tomatoes in with his bushes and basil in with his tomatoes, and to switch around your crops and intermingle them basically. If you have rows, then you could plant something in between your rows, and so that you keep more living roots. It helps to keep your soil covered, and it adds diversity. If you minimize pesticides, and you might not be able to do this all at once and just stop pesticides, but if you learn ways to actually identify your pests and target that one pest instead of spraying every pest, then you'll keep from killing some of the beneficials that are coming into your system as well. So that actually is adding diversity because you're keeping your beneficials and you're not disturbing your ecosystem. Chemical fertilizers, the same thing. You can use lots of different organic type fertilizers, manures, that's incorporating your animals, and use different manures. You can use cow manure, chicken manure, rabbit manure is great. Goat manure is wonderful. All these different manures, the more different diversity you bring in, nature absolutely loves that. And then the same thing with herbicides. The first year that I had a market garden, I had this really weird disease and I couldn't figure it out. And then I realized that it was only on the plants that were around the outside edge of my raised beds. And what had happened is my herbicide had oversprayed onto the plants on the outside edge of the beds. And so it wasn't a disease, it was just where the herbicide had worked on the plants that I wanted to keep. So you can minimize herbicides again by mulching. You won't have to as many weeds, you won't have to worry about that as much. Again, the weeds, you won't have to cultivate them if you or try to hit them with herbicides if you have it mulched. So all of these different practices work together. And I think it's really interesting that also, again, in Dennis's garden, the very first one, that he said that he had mulched there because it was a garden bed. So he had mulched there for many, many years, and that had allowed that soil to rest and recuperate and start the biology in that system going. And it showed by when he revealed his undies that he had really good soil health there. So just picking one of these, you don't have to do them all. Just try to do one. Just avoid stepping on your garden beds. That's the first thing I ever did. And do other things. The more, as you learn and as you figure out ways to make it work, try it. So what are some of the things, Dennis, that you, obviously you don't do a lot of these. What would you say was the most important one?
That I've done? Well, mulching and adding compost, I guess, are kind of similar to me, at least on my little area, because I mulch it about every year, maybe every 2 years, I guess. I'll get more mulch and spread it around there. So it builds up, pretty good. I have good topsoil there anyway. And I dig it when I plant any plants I do. They always say dig a $5 hole for a $1 plant. So I really dig it deeper than it has to be and then fill it up again and incorporate mulch or cow manure or whatever in that hole. So I think mulching to me is one of the more important items in that list, because that'll allow more animals to live in there too, more worms and other soil animals. Is that what you were asking, Kirsten? I'm sorry if that was.
That is what she was asking. Yeah, that was a great answer. And yes, we think that mulch is one of the, me personally, I love mulching because it makes my gardening easier. I have less to do in every way.
Yeah.
So for me, that was an easy first step when I started to work towards kind of soil health as well. Kirsten seems to have dropped off.
Okay.
I think the other thing that Kirsten didn't mention directly, but start small. Start with the easiest, most achievable thing in your operation, in your garden, in your life, and add as you're able. But even doing one thing and thinking about your soil's health is better than nothing. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. Oh, this is one of Kirsten's favorite diagrams.
Wow.
And let me tell you why. I know the numbers are super difficult to see, but along this side, you can see it says feet. So we have feet tall and we have feet down. And different plants can grow roots as deep as this. Kind of shows the different depths that different roots from different natural or native prairie plants grow. And this is the whole idea of diversity. These really short, like maybe Kentucky bluegrass roots are going to kind of capture some water right up top. And then these longer roots from, I don't know what these all are either. Kirsten does. But we have Indian grass here. This has that big root system here, and that's wide and deep. And some will go down to 15 feet. This lower level here, it's 15 feet deep.
Wow.
So this is just kind of helping illustrate the importance of having deep roots and a variety of roots, and what things have varieties of roots as well. Okay, the next thing here is we have a couple evaluation questions. So I just wanted to get a little feedback, and Dennis, I guess you're our man tonight.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and just ask, did anything surprise you over the course of all of the experiments in the 2 classes? Anything that was surprising?
Well, I think tonight just how much the underwear fell apart. I didn't expect this. I really didn't. I'm happy to see that just the elastic band is remaining. Some of the cotton is kind of hanging together, but not by much.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do this. I'm going to do like Sandra and bury some out in my grass real soon.
Mhm.
I think there's enough time yet, enough warm weather for the
Oh, yeah.
microbes to act on that before the frost hits. So I'm looking forward to doing this.
I love that.
What I like the best, I think, was just digging this up and looking at the results.
That's cool.
And I may do it all over again with the soil ped from my grass area. I don't think it'll be as good as in my garden out there.
Mhm.
I'm almost sure it won't be.
That's amazing. Did you have
Yeah.
a favorite experiment over the course of the last 2 months?
Well, I mean, I like doing that soil ped stability test.
Mhm.
I'll try that again, but I'm just amazed again that what we did tonight, digging it up. That's not, just this is the whole climax of the whole class, I guess. And that was really thrilling to dig it up, and because I kept digging, I think, well, it's gone. I mean, where'd it get to? I thought.
Yeah.
And then I saw some little threads.
Yeah, I ran into the same problem. I'm like, I don't know where it is. Oh no, I know I marked it, but where it
Yeah.
go? It's great. It's worth the wait, for sure.
Yeah.
Was there something that you will change in the way you garden based on what you learned in our course?
Well, I'll just keep using mulch, I think. Keep doing that. And I don't use herbicides or pesticides around any garden. I'll let the bugs have it, because I figure if we're going to eat it, I don't want to have any chemicals in meat that I'm putting on there. So, but I just keep the tomatoes watered, and they seem to be healthy just doing that. Because to me, water is the most limiting nutrient. You can fertilize, and I give them some fertilizer occasionally. The liquid fertilizer, that green liquid, I forget, there's a brand name, I forget, Miracle Grow. I'll fertilize them maybe once a month. And that's it. I don't put anything on the leaves of the basil, because I'll be eating those directly. And same with the blueberries and the raspberries. I just water those things. I don't put any stuff on there. So I guess I'll use mulch. I guess maybe more mulch even. Because it just shows you that mulch keeps it cool, like you were saying, and helps the soil fauna and flora.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback. That's great. Mulch is amazing.
Yeah.
And then Dennis, as you know, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. Like, soil science has its whole thing, but then soil health is equally as extensive and interesting. And
Yeah.
there's so many other things to discuss. Is it something you would be interested in learning more about?
Yeah. I mean, when I was working there at the office, we had a soil health kit that some of us use, but you could even measure the carbon dioxide respiration in the soil. I tried it here at my house. It didn't work. It was a failure. I don't know if I did it wrong, but it just didn't work out. But yeah, I mean, I'm like Kirsten. I love soils. I'm a soils geek too. I mean, I really enjoy talking about them and learning more about them. I could take a soils 101 course tomorrow and love it. I could hear it all over again. I mean, so yeah, I intend to learn more. That's what I do. I'm not going to sit back and just cruise, just coast. I want to check the YouTube videos more. On the Soil Urundi's kind of a series.
Yeah, there's tons of information about
Is
that
there? Okay.
online as well. So,
Okay.
awesome. Kirsten, do you have anything to add, or Dennis, do you have any questions for us?
Well, I mean, I want to thank you for doing this. This has been great. Like I said, I'm excited. I want to dig some underwear tomorrow out in my grassed area, and somehow figure where it's at so I can mow over it without hitting the wire flags. But I'll figure it out. But I'll let you know 2 months from now how that experiment comes out.
Oh, we would love that. And you can use anything that's 100% cotton. It doesn't have to be underwear. It can be any
Well,
piece of fabric.
Okay.
Just has to be 100% cotton.
Right. Gotcha. Okay.
Hmm.
Well, I have other cotton underwear, so I'll probably use those. Yeah.
There you go.
More fun. Yeah.
Shanine, did you address yards, or because I know we talked about gardens? Did you talk about the prairie
We
grasses?
briefly looked at that, yeah, but it's hard to read on the screen, so I kind of glossed over it a little bit.
Okay.
But I
Well,
showed
I
the
did-
difference in like root depth and talked about how that changes so dramatically.
Okay. Yeah, and I wanted to talk a little bit about yards. So Dennis, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because it sounded like that's where Sandy had planted hers.
Yeah.
And to address your soil health in your yard, really, it's really hard to have a non-monoculture yard if you have grass. So we do encourage adding clover at least. Clover is a nitrogen fixer and it does add some variety. Also to have more natural areas, to have more areas that show these beautiful native wildflowers with the really deep roots as opposed to the tiny turf roots. And at the very minimum, if you can raise your mower height, the leaves of grass act as solar panels. And so they're bringing that sunshine in and making sugars out of it. They can do it a lot better if their leaves are really tall. So if you leave your mower up as high as it'll go, then your plants will be able to make more sugars for the biome underneath. So those are some things. Also adding organic material that can get expensive if you have a large yard, but anyway, I wanted to address that because it sounded like Sandy had planted hers in her yard, and it's a lot harder to get soil health going in a yard than it is in a garden area where you might be able to do some of these things like mulching and intercropping. So just wanted to say that. Hope I didn't run over, sorry.
No, fine.
Right. Thank you, Kirsten. And thank you for having us, Rachel. With that, we are a little bit after 7. So I'm going to go ahead and just say thanks on behalf of the Soil and Water Conservation District to the library and to our participants. And this was so much fun for both Kirsten. I think I can speak for both of us, both Kirsten and myself. And Rachel, I will hand it on back to you.
All right. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching the recording, then you can still share those photos and your results with us. Their contact information was just on that last slide. And then, of course, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. find out more about events, or if you have any further questions, you can also contact us directly at the library. Email asklibrarian@greenvillelibrary.org, and we can answer almost anything. And thank you for your continued support, and we hope to see you at the next virtual event. Make sure that you check out our event calendar. And then, of course, the library stays 24/7 online, so you can check out greenvillelibrary.org/adult virtual activities, and you can watch videos just like this recording anytime from home. So thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a great night.
Thank you now. Bye-bye.
Healthy soils to you.